After a school of prehistoric piranhas appears, the sheriff of a small town tries to stop them from feeding on the entire population, while her children are trapped in the lake that houses these monsters. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Piranha, from 2010. While drinking a bottle of beer on his boat, Matt Boyd notices that a fish has just taken his bait and manages to pull it into the boat. Suddenly, an earthquake strikes and a whirlpool begins to form in the lake. Frightened, the fisherman tries to start the boat's engine to escape, but ends up falling into the water and is attacked by hundreds of carnivorous fish that unite to devour him alive. The next day, spring break begins and countless tourists flock to Lake Victoria in their speedboats. That afternoon, when he arrives outside the lake, Jake runs into Kelly, his childhood friend, and is surprised to see her, as the young woman moved out of town a few years ago. The young man reveals that he went there to pick up his younger sister, who is taking music lessons at a studio near the lake. While teens are talking, Todd shows up and Kelly gets in the car to go to her band's concert. As soon as Todd hits the gas, Brett throws a glass of drink at Jake and the young man's shirt gets soaked. Furious, Jake goes to get his sister. Then he meets Donnie and Derek, two tourists who are planning to shoot a movie at the lake. When he discovers that the young man is a resident of that town, the director offers him money to accompany his crew during filming. Luckily, Jake knows that lake like the back of his hand and agrees to lead the team. He arranges with Derek to meet him the next morning, and that evening, when his mother comes home, Laura tells him that Jake has accepted a job as a tour guide. Upon hearing this, Julie goes to talk to her son. The woman is the town sheriff and works during the week, so she needs Jake to look after her younger siblings, since they're on vacation. To avoid being scolded, the young man says he'll babysit the next day, but secretly plans to sneak out in the morning. That night, Julie has to answer a call because Matt's wife has contacted the police to report her husband missing. According to Meg, Matt took the boat out fishing around midday the previous day and never returned. The woman spent the whole night looking for him, but only found his boat adrift in the middle of the lake. While walking along the pier towards the boat, Fallon reveals that a team of scientists has detected seismic activity in the lake and will send a team of divers to investigate the possible causes. As Julie knows the lake very well, Fallon decided to appoint her as a guide, and the sheriff will have to accompany the divers the next morning. As Julie approaches the boat, she tries to pull it closer, but can't reach it. Suddenly, the woman falls into the water and, when she returns to the surface, she finds Matt's body floating right behind her. With Fallon's help, the sheriff pulls the body out of the water and they both try to find out what happened to Matt, as he seems to have been decomposing for weeks. Concerned for people's safety, Julie looks into the possibility of closing Lake Victoria until the body report is ready. But Fallon says that this will be an impossible mission, as the town is full of tourists. The next morning, as more people decide to bathe in those waters, the number of victims only increases. While sitting on the pier fishing with his siblings, Jake tries to convince them to lie to their mother, saying that he's been with them all day. However, Laura charges $60 to maintain this lie, and the young man orders his brothers not to answer the doorbell or leave the house until he returns. While Jake goes to meet the camera crew, Julie meets the group of scientists by the lake to accompany them to the site where the seismic activity was detected. Arriving at the pier, Jake spots a crowd gathered around Derek's boat and discovers that all those people are there to see Danny and Crystal dance. At that moment, he bumps into Kelly and Derek invites the young woman to join them in filming his movie. As she has no plans for the day, the girl accepts the invitation, despite Jake's insistence that she not get on the boat. After a few minutes of unsuccessfully trying to fish, Zane convinces his sister to take the boat to the nearest island. Even though she knows she's breaking the deal she made with Jake, Laura decides to accompany her younger brother because she knows she won't be able to change his mind. Meanwhile, on Derek's speedboat, Jake tries to get used to the idea that his childhood friend, who is also the girl he spent years in love with, is giving the ball to a very strange movie director. When they stop at one of the islands, Danny and Crystal jump into the water and invite Jake for a swim while Kelly takes the opportunity to sunbathe. However, the young man refuses the invitation and the women prepare to start filming. While they do a synchronized swim at the bottom of the lake, Derek starts recording and Jake receives a call from his mother. While trying to convince her that he's at home with his siblings, the young man realizes that Kelly is no longer sunbathing on the float and starts looking for her. Worried, the young man jumps into the water without even realizing that a huge school of monstrous piranhas is approaching. When she hears Jake shouting her name, Kelly appears and the young man discovers that his friend has been inside the boat all this time. When they reach the island, Zane fails to tie the rope properly and Laura is furious to discover that her boat is adrift. Now the two siblings have no way of getting home. The solution is to attract the attention of the boats that are passing nearby to ask for help, so Kelly gets into the water to try to get closer to the boats. While walking along the rocks, the girl steps on a shard of glass and ends up hurting herself. Immediately, the smell of blood attracts the attention of a carnivorous fish, but Laura gets out of the water before it can reach her. At this point, Julie and Novak find an underground lake that is even larger than Lake Victoria, and the scientist reveals that the earthquake that happened the day before opened a fissure that allowed the two lakes to connect. Meanwhile, Sam and Paula are preparing to go diving to explore that underground crevice, and they find a crack approximately 180 feet deep. As they advance along the crevice, the pair feel a sudden drop in temperature, and Sam decides to enter a cave he finds there. When he reaches the other side, he informs Novak that there are fish eggs scattered throughout the cave and approaches to try and catch one of them. At this point, the diver is bitten by one of the creatures and his hand starts to bleed. Frightened, he lights a flare to see around him and realizes that he is surrounded by a school of piranhas. Immediately, Sam is attacked and Paula is terrified when she hears her friend's screams. In an attempt to find out what's going on, the woman goes to meet him and tries to escape when she sees her partner being eaten alive. However, during her escape, the woman also ends up being attacked and Novak decides to dive in to help them. Minutes later, he finds Paula and takes her back to the surface, but when he gets into the boat, the man realizes that all that's left are the pieces of his partner. Along with Paula's corpse, Novak manages to bring one of those carnivorous fish onto the boat, and Julie decides to take the animal to Mr. Carl Goodman's store. The old man immediately puts the creature into one of his aquariums and is amazed, as the species disappeared from the planet more than 2 million years ago. When he discovers that the shoal has lived the last few years trapped in an underground cave, Carl comes to the conclusion that these creatures fought each other and had to devour each other in order to survive. According to him, piranhas hunt in shoals to join forces and thus be able to devour larger prey. The first bite is intended to draw blood from its victim, and, shortly afterwards, the whole school is attracted. After hearing this, the sheriff begins to think of a plan to eliminate those animals once and for all and enlists Novak's help to try to put it into practice. That afternoon, during filming, Derek passes his speedboat near the island where Zane and Laura have been stranded, and Jake is furious to discover that his siblings have disobeyed his orders not to leave the house. Despite hearing the children's pleas for help, Derek decides to ignore them in order to continue recording, but changes his mind when Jake reveals that his mother is the town sheriff. At that moment, the man decides to take the boat to the island to pick up the children, but he has no idea that, a few meters away, a woman has just suffered an insane attack, in which her legs are devoured while she tries to get out of the water. Seeing hundreds of young people partying around the lake, Julie contacts the police station and orders them to send the Coast Guard to empty Lake Victoria before anyone else is hurt. Minutes later, Fallon and his team show up to try to expel the bathers, but they are completely ignored. As a last-ditch attempt to get the young people attention, the policeman draws his gun and shoots up twice. Immediately, everyone stops what they're doing to hear what the man has to say, and, through a megaphone, Fallon declares a state of emergency. However, once again he is ignored and the young people start jumping into the water in protest. After scolding his siblings, Jake helps them onto the boat, and then the group heads back to shore. During the journey, the children sit around the glass dome and watch the school of piranhas passing under the boat. Just then, the boat's engine gets stuck in a tangle of seaweed and Andrew informs them that they are trapped. Furious at missing an entire day of recording, Derek takes all his anger out on Jake and blames him for them being stuck in the middle of the lake. After pushing Andrew, the man grabs the steering wheel and starts to force the engine to try to get out of there, but is unsuccessful. Meanwhile, on the coast, the sheriff orders the bathers to get out of the water immediately, as they are in danger. However, the young people don't listen to her and end up being attacked by the carnivorous fish. Desperate swimmers try to return to their boats, but as the blood spreads in the water, the attack intensifies and many are unable to survive. At that moment, the young people who aren't in the water help the bathers onto the floating platforms, but due to the excess weight, the platforms start to tip over and everyone falls back into the water. Suddenly, a metal cable snaps and cuts the body of a young woman in half. Seeing all those people being eaten alive, Novak decides to act and, after grabbing a gun, he climbs onto a jet ski to help them reach the shore. The scientist then uses the shotgun to shoot into the water and manages to eliminate some evil fish. While trying to escape, the pilots end up causing accidents and some bathers end up being wiped out by the boats. Afraid of becoming the next victim, Todd takes a small motorboat and starts running over people in the lake while trying to get to dry land. At this point, he ends up causing even more eliminations and doesn't even bother to help the tourists out of the water. After finishing off several people who were trying to get close to him for help, Todd's boat engine stops working and he gets stuck in the lake. At this point, the hair of one of the bathers gets caught in the engine's propellers and, When Todd finally manages to turn it back on, the girl has the top of her head destroyed. The problem is that all this effort is for nothing, because before he can start, a group of people try to get on the boat and the young man ends up falling into the water. After a few minutes of straining the engine, Derek finally manages to get rid of the seaweed and accelerates the boat. However, at this point, the ship ends up crashing into a rock and the glass dome is shattered. During the accident, Kelly hits her head and faints while a huge amount of water invades the boat. Just then, Derek and Crystal fall into the lake and are attacked by the piranhas. Seeing the actress being devoured and one of the fish coming out of her mouth, the director quickly swims back to the surface and Danny tries to help him out of the water. When he realizes that the boat is sinking, Jake immediately goes after his siblings and realizes that Kelly is trapped in the kitchen. As the water is full of piranhas, Jake asks the young woman to climb into one of the cupboards while he tries to reach her through the skylight. With Danny's help, Derek manages to return to the boat and the woman uses an oar to push the fish back into the water. Seeing that Derek's legs are completely destroyed, Jake asks his siblings to stay away so as not to witness the grotesque scene. Soon afterwards, the director ends up dying from blood loss and Jake tries to open the skylight to prevent the same thing happening to Kelly. After the attack, the Coast Guard helps the survivors out of the water, but many of them are so badly injured that they can't survive. While his colleagues remove the bodies from the water and try to calm the bathers, Fallon shoots at the piranhas and, when the ammunition in his gun runs out, he uses the engine of a boat to stop the fish from getting any closer. However, during this heroic mission, the policeman ends up being attacked and sacrifices himself so that the wounded youngsters can reach the shore. At that moment, Julie is helping the victims tend to their wounds and receives a phone call from Jake. The young man reveals that he is in the middle of the lake with his siblings in a boat that is about to sink. Upon hearing this, the sheriff panics and immediately steals a speedboat to go and rescue her children. Concerned for the woman's safety, Novak decides to accompany her and in a few minutes they arrive at the place where the boat is. As the surrounding area is full of rocks, Julie throws down a rope and asks Jake to tie it as high as possible. She then uses the rope to get across and manages to reach the other side. After hugging her children, the woman discovers that Kelly is trapped at the bottom and the skylight is jammed. The young woman is surrounded by the carnivorous fish and there is no other way to get her out except through the water. So Julie decides to take her children to the other boat and says that when they are all safe, she will come back for her. However, Jake claims that Kelly is only on that boat because of him and refuses to leave without her. So the sheriff says she will help Laura and Zane cross and then return to help Jake save her friend. The first to climb the rope is Danny and Julie orders the children to follow her. However, during the crossing, the piranhas start jumping out of the water to try to reach their prey and Danny ends up becoming a victim. After being bitten a few times, the young woman can no longer hold on and ends up falling into the water. At the same time, her body is completely devoured. While the piranhas devour the woman's body, the children take the opportunity to finish the crossing. Suddenly, the structure to which Jake has tied the rope comes loose and Julie falls into the water. Luckily, Novak notices the accident in time and starts the boat's engine to pull the rope taut again. When his entire family finishes the crossing, Jake ties the rope around his waist and plans to use Derek's body as bait to attract the piranhas. However, when the young man approaches to pick him up, the director wakes up and tries to communicate with him, but at that moment his vital signs are completely interrupted. Realizing that this time Derek really is lifeless, Jake throws his body into the water and the blood attracts the piranhas. He then jumps into the water and dives through the hole in the dome. Seeing her friend, Kelly is relieved and hugs him. At that moment, the young man contacts Novak and asks him, as soon as he gives the signal, to step on the accelerator to get them out of there as quickly as possible. However, before leaving, Jake opens the valve of 2 gas cylinders inside the boat and asks Kelly to hold on tightly to his body, as they will have to swim out from under the boat. After giving the signal, the young man kisses the girl and they both swim out of the boat together. Jake then lights a flare and pushes it into the boat. However, when he starts the boat, Novak realizes that the engine has stopped working and Julie is in despair because her son is about to be attacked. However, just as the couple were about to be eliminated, Novak manages to break the lock and the 2 youngsters are saved. Seconds later, when the flames of the flare come into contact with the gas, a huge explosion occurs and the piranhas turn into barbecue. After helping Jake and Kelly onto the boat, the survivors see hundreds of fish floating in the water and come to the conclusion that the entire school was wiped out during the explosion. Just then, Julie receives a call from Carl and the elderly man says he has very bad news. According to him, the specimen that the sheriff brought to his store doesn't have mature reproductive organs, which means that the piranhas that attacked the bathers are still young. Upon hearing this, Novak wonders where the parents of those monsters are and ends up being attacked by a giant fish. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.